This is a tutorial for Captury Live, our real-time markerless motion capture system. Hello, I'm Nils from the Captury, and we build markerless motion capture technology. We have two main products, Captury Studio and Captury Live. And today I'm going to talk about Captury Live, which has all the features that Captury Studio has, but in addition, it's able to track live, it streams live, and it gives you immediate feedback of the motion that you've captured. Captury Live typically comes with 8 cameras, but you may require more cameras if your volume is particularly large, or you want to track a large number of persons. You can either mount them on tripods or on wall mounts, depending on your requirements. In this tutorial, I'll give you an overview of setting up the system, operating it, tracking, recording, and exporting data. Alright, so this is the user interface of Captury Live. You can double click and to switch between showing all cameras and showing a particular camera. If you want to go into a 3D view, you can use the mouse wheel to zoom out, and then you can click on the camera and go back into that view. Or you can click on the camera on the left side. For rotating in 3D, use the middle mouse button, and for translating, use Shift and the middle button. This is like Blender. If you prefer the Maya navigation, go in the menu to navigate Maya navigation, and then it switches to the Alt and then left and right button. Alright, so the first thing we do when we set up a new system is we check that all cameras are in focus, and for that we have the tool up here called Focus. If you switch to a camera, it will show these green overlays for the edges. If I turn it off, it looks like this, and if I turn it back on, you can see all these edges are highlighted in green. And if they're really green, then you're in focus. If they're not so green, then they're not in focus. So I'm just switching through the cameras right now. And this one's slightly out of focus. That's the camera over there. So I just go there and twist the lens until it's actually in focus. Alright, better. This one looks good. Camera 7 also looks good. Okay, so the next step is we work ourselves through the toolbar here. The next step is Calibrate. Here we have lens calibration and volume calibration. The lens is for calibrating the intrinsic parameters like focal length and distortion parameters of the lens. And the volume tab is for calculating camera pose, like position and orientation in space, and calibrating the ground plane. So most of these have already been calibrated. You can see here that the error is really low and that the focal length is roughly 3 millimeters, because these lenses are supposed to be 3 millimeters. The last camera, you can actually also see that it's very distorted, whereas if we switch to a different camera, we can see that the straight lines up here are actually straight, or look actually straight in the image, whereas here there's a bit of a curve here and here, also here. So we definitely need to recalibrate that one. So what we do is we just click on the Capture Calibration Board button over here, and then we walk up to that camera and wave the board in front of the camera until it turns green. One interesting feature is that it automatically switches between cameras if you just walk up to the board when it's in capture mode. So like this. When you install your system for the first time, make sure to keep detecting boards until all cameras show an almost green view. Okay, so the next step in the calibration is the volume calibration. That's the tab over here. And there I also just hit Capture Calibration Board, but then I showed the board not to just one camera, but I kind of tried to stay in the center of the volume and show it to multiple cameras at the same time. Alright, that's green enough. So you don't have to actually wait until it's super green for all cameras. It's sufficient if they're all kind of just green. And then you just hit the calibrate button, and then you can actually see in the views that the cameras are actually, like, these overlays are on top of the actual cameras. So the only thing that's wrong now still is if we go into 3D view, we'll notice that all the cameras are actually below the ground. And that's because we haven't told it yet where the floor is. So we hit the continue button and we put the board on the ground somewhere in the center. And hit set floor. And now actually it also makes all the cameras upright, and the coordinate system is kind of at the corner of the board. If you have a board with the colored squares, then X will point along the red square, blue along the blue square, and green up. So that's pretty much it. That's all the setup we need. The next tab in the line is the track tab. With the track tab, you track, or you control the tracking. There's a few features you can enable and disable for the skeletons that you want to track. First, you can enable and disable finger tracking, and you can also enable face tracking. And these other two are helpful when you actually want to rig your own character to our skeleton. If you enable rib bones, then the skeleton actually has additional bones kind of going sideways from the spine, and they will scale with the width of the torso, so that when you rig your skeleton, it's easier to get the armpits to look right if you actually have these rib bones. The other ones are the twist bones, which are typical upper arm and lower arm rotation twist bones, so they can distribute the skinning a bit more evenly. So I'm just going to use with fingers for now. So there's several ways of initializing tracking. On the one hand, there's the circle on the ground that we call the search area. And then there's also the drag option, like you can drag new skeleton and you just drop it onto a person and it starts tracking that person. Yeah, so the easiest if you're operating the system alone is to use this search area, and even when your computer is away from your tracking area, you can just start searching and then walk up to it. So that's what I'm going to do now. What you see there was that when I walked into the area, it immediately started tracking me. But then I did some motions, and this was to help the system figure out like the actual dimensions of my body, like the length of my arms and legs. Yeah, so the idea is that you kind of try to elaborate all major bones. What I normally do is something like this. And yeah, it's like a 10-second initialization. And when you want to drag onto a person, you just kind of go like this. And you do the same thing. You can switch between different visualization modes with S. So there's the mesh visualization, then there's this skeleton like with the 3D bones, and we have like a stick skeleton mode now. And the last one is kind of a volume representation of the body that also shows the colors. And with the green button over here, you can turn a particular tracking that like skeleton on or off. I can also drag an existing skeleton onto a person, and you can make it invisible. Oh yeah, like in this thing, you can also save a skeleton. Like if you right-click it, you can save it and then load it later with load skeleton. And that way you can initialize your performer one day, and the next day when they come in, they already have a skeleton and they don't have to redo the initialization, which is particularly interesting for live performance. You can also turn this initialization requirement off, and then it's just going to be like a one frame initialization of the person, which is interesting for like interactive kiosk type applications. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is record something. And down here is the shot management panel, and here this is the project folder, and you can go open project directory and then choose on your file system where you want to record stuff. I'm happy with this one, so I just cancel it. And now I can either just hit record and it's going to create a new shot called shot 001, Or I can click on this icon, create new empty shot, and pre-name my shots. So I can call this one test, and I call the next one hello. And now I have two shots that are completely empty, nothing has been recorded into them. But you can that way you can create your shot list before actually starting the recording date. And then when you're in the middle of the recording, you just click on the next shot that you want to record. Yeah, so let's just do that. Let's actually track. All right. Okay, so now I recorded something and it automatically switches to the next empty shot in the list. So you don't even have to click if you just want to move on to the next shot. If you want to do a retake, just click on hello again. Yep, that was a much better performance. And it automatically calls it take 002, so we'll just play it back and have a look at it in 3D. And in comparison, the other one. Yeah. So this one's definitely much better than this one. I'll just give it some stars. I can also comment on it, like let's say this one's too far back. And add custom columns here. Just right click here and say add column. And we can call it something like, and let's add another one called, so that's performer here. And customs at the end, so let's just move that up here. And yeah, so you can keep track of a lot of random data that you would normally keep track of in a shooting day. You can also create directories if you want to structure your data even more. So let's call this, let's create a directory and call it food. And now I create another shot in there. I'll test again. And all of these are actually just folders inside this particular folder. So if I right click here and go show in file manager, it'll actually show us what data we have. And here we don't really have a lot in it, just the camera calibration and the meta file. But the recording actually has the video files, which are just standard video files. And it has a bunch of things for the actor. It also has an FBX because I configured it to export in FBX and also BVH. So that's what we're going to show you next. In the settings, you can configure what it's supposed to export at, like whenever you record or save. So there's a few presets. Captury is the default one. And you can select the naming convention, how many frames you want to connect, like whether you want to save stuff in degrees or millimeters or meters or whatever. And which way is up axis. Here I can set whether I want to export at full frame rate. Right now I'm recording at 50. So if you only need 25 in your animation, then you can record at half frame rate. That will reduce file sizes. For FBX, most people prefer to add an additional bone, like a static root bone, but you can also have the global motion on the added root bone. Yeah, there's also CSV format that exports all the joint angles in case you want to do biomechanical analysis, for example. Yeah, BVH, rotation order. Actually, all of these should take the preset details up here into account as well. So if I change the up axis to Z, then both the FBX and the BVH and the CSV files will all have the Z axis as the up axis. So one other thing we can do is if we go to playback mode, we can actually track it again. Like in the track panel, it now has these buttons for track forward and track backwards. In case something didn't work, for example, a jump landing sometimes works better if you track it backwards. So let's just go from here and just track this backwards. And sometimes that improves the tracking quality somewhat. Let's save it, and that's also going to re-export everything. Yeah, so sometimes when you change settings in the export settings, you may want to re-export your shots with the changed settings. All right. We'll describe the streaming setup in Unreal, Unity and Motion Builder in separate videos. Check out the other videos in our channel. Like, subscribe, stay tuned, and bye bye.